Since the release of AMDs FSR and seeing how good it actually is, I've wanted to find out how much of an improvement it could bring to one of those super budget graphics cards many of us have out there. Now, because FSR is supported by Nvidia's 10, 20 and 30 series graphics cards, I thought what better to test this out with other than one of the most popular super budget graphics cards of the last year, the Nvidia Geforce GT 1030. So let's see if AMD's FidelityFX Super Resolution can bring a playable experience to the GT 1030 when it comes to modern titles running in 1080p. But before that, make sure you hit that subscribe button below so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and also remember to join the Discord community using the links in the description to talk about tech, or even join in with our game giveaways. So I decided to use the GT 1030 because during the GPU crisis it's been one of the only budget graphics cards that you could still buy new. This means it's been the only option for many new builders and gamers. If you're one of these people, you would already found the limitations with the card. It's not really something that was designed for full high-end gaming, although it does tend to hold its own in some of the indie titles and particularly some of the older titles. The GT 1030 I decided to pick up was this one. It's the MSI GT 1030 2GB Aero ITX. And I chose this because I thought it just looked quite cool. Unlike the others, it's a dual slot, air-cooled card that requires no additional power cables, which makes it perfect for turning those older, pre-built office machines into gaming machines, and they currently cost about £80. Now that's not a great price for normal times, but considering the availability issues and the higher prices of the higher end cards at the moment, it does make it one of the most powerful cards that you can buy for under £100 new. This one in particular is the OC version, which makes it a tad faster than the standard ones, comprising of 2GB of GDDR5 memory, a base clock speed of 1265 MHz, and a boost clock speed of 1518 MHz. But enough about the card, it's a GT 1030. Let's drop it in our test machine and see how it performs on some of the modern games. And more importantly, how much of a boost FSR will actually bring. So for this test we're going to be using Terminator Resistance. Now the FSR library isn't extensive at the moment, but there are more games being added all the time. But using this game will give us a bit of a benchmark for being able to compare to other items that we've tested it before in previous videos. If we look at the options, we're currently running in low settings with 1080p with FidelityFX Super Resolution turned off. Now this will give us a good baseline for playing it when we turn it back on. If we continue the game, we'll jump straight into a couple of videos into one of our first safe houses that we come along to. Now if we skip through this and actually get it to a point where we can move around, we'll be able to start measuring the frames per second. And straight away we can see that it's not actually that good. This card is pretty much under pressure, with it being 100% utilised straight away, even in the dark patches. Currently we're getting around 20 frames per second with an average of 22, but once we go outside we may actually see a big difference in how it performs. Once we're out now in the light, we can see that the frames per second do dip down into the 15 range, and it's quite stuttery as well as a game. There's not a lot of very clear movement or anything like that. But let's have a look, see if turning FSR on will actually produce a bit of a difference. If we go to the options and turn FSR to a performance mode, considering the hardware that we're using, we'll see what's the best we can actually get out of it. Go back to game and we can instantly see that the FPS jumps up to around 31. So depending on what you're actually looking at, you can actually see that the frames per second are greatly improved, although the picture quality has reduced significantly, particularly on things like the railings. When you're moving around, it's quite blurry, it's not very defined until you get up close, but that's going to be one of the effects of running in FSR anyway. So although we managed to increase the frames per second in 1080p, it's probably still not a very great gameplay experience all round, due to the fact that we're running in the lowest settings with a reasonably console-like frames per second, but it does mean that we can actually have some form of playable experience. Now this is at 1080p, so let's have a look to see if FSR can give us something better at around 720, considering that 720p is probably more aligned for what this graphics card can do. We'll switch it down and we'll see if we can get FSR to actually give a boost. So we've adjusted the game down now to 720 and we'll rerun some tests without FSR on and we'll see how good it looks. So straight away we can see that there is an increase in FPS straight away. We're running now at around 30 frames per second just in normal native low settings. And the game doesn't look too bad. It looks very similar to the 1080p version. You're obviously missing a little bit of the picture quality, but it's not too bad. But it is a lot more smoother than when we were in 1080p, and we're getting a much more stable frames per second. Now if we go and turn FSR back on, and this time we'll turn it back to performance mode again, we'll see what we can actually increase that to. So obviously now it's jumped straight up into the high 50s, low 60s, depending on what you're looking at. We're getting an average of 68, 69 frames per second. So FSR unfortunately didn't give us the experience we wanted in 1080p, but it has made the game quite playable at 720, which is probably what this graphics card was designed more for with games like this. Considering that this game doesn't actually have a minimum requirement set that includes the GT 1030, and the card isn't sitting there nice and comfortable at around 99% usage with a 43-degree temperature, it's not doing too bad at all. Considering that we are also getting around 70 frames per second, we could probably boost the FidelityFX Super Resolution up a little bit just to save a bit of our quality. So we'll put it onto balance now and we'll have a bit more of a wander around and see what we're getting. So we're now averaging around your 47 frames per second, which isn't too bad. It's a playable experience, not great, but if this is the only card that you've got in your machine at the moment, you can see that you are going to be able to play it either way. So there we have it. The GT 1030 just isn't up to it with new AAA titles, and unfortunately AMD's FSR couldn't give it the boost needed to give you a playable experience at 1080p. But it does give you that much needed boost at low resolutions, opening up a whole new library of games that you can play. Let me know in the comments if you have a GT 1030 and what games do you actually play with it. I think I will look to use this card in a nice retro build sometime, but until then, thanks for watching and I'll see you again next time.